Hello and welcome to the Outcast Creative Industry Interviews number 40. That's 40 in just over a year, 15 months since I started this channel in this direction last July. It's been great talking to all these different people from all sides of the creative industries, and we've got an absolutely fantastic cracker of a guest on the show today. But before I bring the gentleman in, I've got my guest co-host with me who hasn't been here for a while, the Inside Man. You've been off.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Have you been off on film shoots and getting up at in
Oh,
congenial hours of the morning?
yeah, all sorts, all
I
sorts.
can imagine.
Yeah.
Look forward to hearing all about that. Well, it's funny that actually when I was working in the cinema for Canon Films, one of the things that I got was a huge big brochure, the sort of thing that was produced for Cannes, and in this massive tomb, it was bigger than A3. It was huge. This book.
You're talking about the big screen internationals that they used to do for
Yeah,
MyFed and Cannes, aren't you?
yeah,
Yeah,
but it was yeah, there was a big screen international, but I think it was like an additional sort of supplement that came with it for the Cannes film market, and people would buy posters in there. And in this thing, it's fascinating for me because I was so into films. It was full of all of these movies that were either soon to be produced or were, but at the time, of course, I just assumed that they would all be coming out because even Albert Boone's Spider-Man was one of the posters in there.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And one of the posters that was there was and I remember this poster because I had it up on my wall for a really long time because I got to take this book home. And it was for a film called The Primevals. Now, keep in mind that this is 1986 or something like that. Maybe
you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. It was 86. It was it was 86.
Well, our guest has just been working on this film, which has finally been completed in 2023. And here it is on IMDb. I'm going to talk to Jeff Farley about that and other things. This man has worked on a huge number of stuff, but he also began his career with Empire Pictures. That's Charles Band's company, whose films we digested off the video shelves as soon as they came out in the UK. You're talking Ghoulies, Arena, Robojocks, The Eliminators, so many of which then later were on my own shelf. And some of those Jeff actually worked on. So without any further ado, it's a special effects man, makeup artist, and many other things under his belt. Jeff Farley, thank you so much for coming.
Hey.
Hello there, Lance. It's very nice to see both of you, or meet both of you, and
see me and meet the inside man, as it were.
Chat about chat about whatever there is to chat about.
Well, I mean, what I like to do, Jeff, with my guests, just to get a sense of kind of your own, how culture impacted you when you were growing up, before we get on to things like, I mean, we've got loads of questions we want to ask, everything from working on the Blob to Demolition Man and all the other stuff you've done. But I just want to ask you a few quick questions just to get a sense of your own journey. Can you remember when you were a kid the first film that you saw in the cinema?
Oh, sure, in the cinema. Yeah, it's like, that was The Projected Man. That was Richard Gordon's film.
What year would that have been? Do you have any idea?
Like that was like in the late 60s at some point. I mean, did that come out in 68 or 69, I think, maybe, or something like that? But I recall it distinctly. My grandparents took me, of all people, and I remember Bryant Holiday and calling him Moonface because he had those kind of pock marks on the side of his head, and it was all kind of malformed. But at the age I was, that's really all I could refer him to him as, and it wasn't until years later I actually began. For a while I owned the Fiend Without a Face creature license to produce a model kit, and so I was in direct contact with Richard, and he and I would meet, and I got to tell him that story, and it pleased him very much, that all these years, I was telling him, hey, it's a film I definitely remember as a kid.
That's pretty similar to Inside Man's story being influenced by Ray Harryhausen, and then he got to meet him later, which I've had a few guests on that have done that.
I didn't meet Ray until like almost he was still in post production on Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger when I met him finally. And,
damn, everybody got to meet Ray except for me. Everybody I get on here has met Ray Harryhausen except for me.
Boy.
What was the last film you saw in the cinema?
Oh, and I know that I had to have seen something at some point recently. What was it? I mean, I don't think I've gone to a movie this year at all. But I remember seeing the Godzilla versus Kong film. Was it Kong versus Godzilla, or was it whatever that was?
One of the early ones with the guys in the suits and all the big model work and
recent film that I've seen in the cinema, or the
sorry, you're talking about the recent CGI. That's right. I mean, no, I did ask the most recent.
That's but that something. It was entertaining for the time being, but I don't remember much about it, which is kind of
that doesn't surprise me.
But,
you just quick answer on these next few, and then we'll dive into your career. Which is it fair to say you a fan of the sci-fi genre, because you've done quite a lot of science fiction work?
Oh, sure. I think it's fascinating, and
which sci-fi show on TV would you say is you look back on and think, yeah, that was really good television?
Well, I mean, the original Star Trek, I always have a soft spot for that. Although I didn't watch much of it in the original when it originally aired. My dad watched it, so I kind of caught it with him. But later on, of course, you get nostalgic for that stuff, and you check it out, and you go, wow, that's really, really good. I love Space 1999.
Oh, I've got a couple of Eagles back here.
Anything the Andersons did, was okay by, any of the Super Marionation shows. I mean, all that stuff. Ultraman, anything that we saw, that we would get here in the States was like gold, because we got only such a small amount of what was really
about. Yeah,
and we're getting it as adults, but still.
Normally, when I've got an actor guest on, I'll ask them which actor or actress did you look up to, when you were younger, before you got in the profession. So I guess what I want to ask you is, which special effects or makeup person kind of did were you drawn to, or influenced you maybe, or was somebody that drew you into the business? Is there a particular individual, or just somebody you maybe greatly admire in that realm of makeup and special effects more generally?
It's tough to pick just one, but
you can have a few. That's okay.
I can certainly name one really off the top of my head. Was David Allen, because he. When I was a teenager and I found out that
Equinox, David Allen.
Equinox, yeah, definitely. That I saw that when it first came out in the theaters in 1971 in Los Angeles. I saw it like opening night, and the day I saw it, on an LA TV show, morning news program, Dave and Dennis Muren were both on the show. Promoting Equinox, and Dave had the Taurus model with him, and I had and Dennis had the Demon model with him, and Dave talked about the principles of stop. That's what got me into stop motion. Eventually create my own Taurus. And
hey, look at that. Let me enlarge that.
Yeah, this is a full ball and socket, and this is and I own a prop from Equinox. So I own the miniature book from it. Dave gave it to me the first night. But Dave became a really good friend. I mean, and it was, and eventually I went to Romania with him on the Primevals, and and I feel really good too because well, maybe indirectly or directly, I was the one who introduced him to Chris Endicott. So they've had such a great career, you know, that I feel really proud of that. That was, I mean, Chris is such a wonderful guy, and I'm so proud to know him and as a friend, you know. So
yeah, when you're talking about making the Primevals, which we are going to cover, we're jumping ahead a little bit. You're talking about recently, because the film was only recently completed, as opposed to when it was first conceived.
Yeah, well, I met Dave in 1978 at his studio, and they were already in production on the Primevals at that point, because that's when Charlie Band had come in, and they had already built, like, the arena set was already built, and I saw a bunch of the models from it. I saw some in progress sculptures, and I took some really terrible photos also. They're just like the worst, like Kodak Instamatic photos. But you can still kind of see the mind control gun in a couple of the shots, and you know, years later, I actually saw that thing full scale, the full scale version of it in Romania, and it was like such an amazing experience to do that. To think all those years ago, I actually saw that stuff when I was a kid, you know, and then years later, I'd be part of it.
So that I mean, that film has taken from when it was first kind of put into pre-production, and I guess it effectively went into turnaround, and then it's come back full circle. It's taken 40 years plus to make.
It's been, yeah, I mean, well, it's been actually it's been almost 30 years. Next year will be 30 years since we shot it, but its inception was, well, we'll digress just a little bit from me and talk about this, but in 66 or 7, after, I think it was after Dave finished Equinox, and I think it was in 67, that's when he conceived a project called Raiders of the Stone Ring, which is sort of an Edgar Rice Burroughs type story that contained all the elements with the lizard men and creatures in the valley, and things like that. And they and Dave made it his life's goal to direct that film, and it went through everybody. I mean, it was even at Hammer Films where they tried to retitle it Zeppelin versus Pterodactyls.
That's right. Yeah, I remember.
So Dave just had it. I mean, Dave had it everywhere, and like I said, and it was the Cine Fantastic did a feature story on it that about an unproduced film, you know, film that was just going into production and which they'd never done before, and then the film shut down again. So it looked like it would never get off the ground, and then lo and behold, I somehow stumbled onto. Actually, my roommate was going to be hired to go to Romania, and he didn't want to do that. He wanted to go work on Demon Knight, you know, the Tales from the Crypt movie. And so by default, I got hired to go out there and to Romania and do the show.
So this shot here, for example, is this from principal photography in Romania, or is this something that was done earlier?
That is actually from the shoot in Romania, in Bucharest. Yeah, we shot in this really ornate university for all of these scenes. Yeah, the scenes with the Yeti and all that stuff was there. And I'll never forget the day that Dave Allen said, he goes, Robert Cornthwaite is showing up tomorrow. And I go, Robert Cornthwaite from Thing for Another World? Is like, he's still alive. You know, I didn't even know he was, you know, still alive at that moment. And the next morning I went down to the dining room at the hotel, and I found Robert sitting there. And I introduced myself, and he and I ended up having breakfast together, a really nice conversation, and I got to tell him how Thing from Another World scared the pants off my dad, and you know, he gave an autograph to my dad, you know, for me telling that story. So,
the basic premise of Oh, I mean, we'll cover this now as we've segued into it, and then we'll get back to how you got started. The premise of Primevals, I get the impression it is that kind of Edgar Rice Burroughs / Jules Verne. People get lost through time into another world. The Lost World kind of. Is that a fair assessment of the type of film it is?
It is superficially at this point now, because the original story, like I said, it takes place on an adventure or something like that, and he's on a Zeppelin, and I believe it was a turn of the century thing too, so it was like very fanciful, and and they get lost in this area, and unfortunately what happened was Dave sort of became less enamored with the story. He started seeing its superficialities and said that it didn't have enough meat to it, really. It was just, it lived to serve the special effects that would be in it. He wanted to do more than that. And another thing that killed that version of the project was Disney's Island at the Top of the World had been
That's right. Yeah.
out of the same plot points. So, because there were also Vikings in the original story,
right?
Or there were hominids also, I believe, but I believe they were more human. I mean, maybe there wasn't even hominids, but there were definitely like Viking settlers in the original version. So it'd give a love interest for the protagonist, and they went ahead and shot a teaser sort of for it, which contains some pretty spectacular effects scenes. A great scene with the lizard man spearing one of the Vikings, and it's a brilliant shot. But again, Dave saw what he saw was a lot of its problems, and so he decided to go back to the drawing board. But it didn't really go anywhere until Randy Cook came in. And, of course, everybody knows him from King Kong, and, from Peter Jackson, King Kong, and The Gate, and The Gate 2. And I mean, Randy was an outstanding designer and stop motion animator and special effects guy himself. So and he started out with Dave on Laser Blast. But he came up with sort of he and Dave sort of worked on the plot points together, came up with this whole new angle, which at the time was pretty revolutionary. And a lot of ways now, some of those ideas have filtered into other films. But from what I understand, the screenings that have been held for it now, like Sitges just had, is that how am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, that's right. They have a very nice film festival there, actually.
Yeah, but they just screened it. And apparently everybody's seen it, says, yeah, it's a little bit old-fashioned, but at this point, it actually is really refreshing to see something like that.
That's exactly what I was thinking when I was looking at the pictures. It has got this very sort of kitsch Ray Harryhausen vibe.
I'm looking forward to it for that. I mean, as a fan, I'm looking forward to it,
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, let's go right back to the beginning, and thanks for the people tuning in. I see you've got some
all the way back to
there's some comments in here already, and we've got someone, a Full Moon fan here. Jester Mikey's in the house, a true Full Moon fan.
Sure. He's great. I know Jester Mikey. Hey, what's up, man?
Yeah. So and a couple of my other regulars here. There's Cannoli Sasquatch that actually looked like a picture of Cannoli Sasquatch that we just had up just now. I didn't know that Jeff did your makeup, Cannoli. So let's go right back to the beginning. Now, the funny thing is, your first credit on IMDb is for a film that I remember I saw in the video shop, and I had a very good relationship with the guy that ran the video store. And I saw the cover of this film, and I thought, oh yeah, this looks cool, and it's got the Canon logo on it, so you kind of, you're not going to get an Oscar winner, but it might have some action in it. And that was Force of Darkness.
Force of Darkness. My goodness, you actually.
I remember this now, and what the guy in the video store said to me was, he went, "Yeah, don't get that out, Lance. It's not very good." And I was like, "Oh, okay then. But I always wanted to rent stuff. I always rented stuff on the basis of the cover. That's how I ended up watching so many dodgy Italian ripoffs. So, but I thought the cover was kind of cool. How did you get it? Yeah. So this was your first job, right?
Not my first job. No, this came about. My first real job was like on Kingdom of the Spiders. I mean, that was back in '77, right after I met Ray Harryhausen at Farley Ackerman's place. And 2 weeks later, I was dremeling. My friends and I were dremeling like 300 spiders, background spiders. And but I worked on a few things, some short films and a few things like that. And I'm trying to think now. I think Force of Darkness came after I did stuff for Danny DeVito's directorial debut, The Ratings Game, and I built an animatronic parrot puppet and a prop for the end of the film, like a prop TV award. And so those are just little jobs I was doing, and these are like unpaid jobs. I mean, I'm just helping people out that I met, and they're just handing me the stuff to do, and I'm not getting paid for it. It really didn't matter to me at all.
So was Kingdom of the Spiders an unpaid job?
That was the number one job that I worked on. I told that to William Shatner years later, and he was very happy to hear that too. He signed my poster, so
yeah, because he's in that. William Shatner's in that movie.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, I like that film. It's got good reviews too. It's one of those films that people really like. But as far as Force of Darkness goes, I knew a guy named Hal Miles who he worked in the optical effects industry and stop motion, and he eventually got into working over places like Stan Winston's on Leviathan and the animatronics department and stuff like that. But I'd become friends with Hal, and he got this job, this Force of Darkness job. I don't remember how he got it, but again, it was like we had like nothing, no money to work with, really. I mean, and a matter of fact, I was like, it was so crude. I mean, gosh, I didn't think to put any reinforcement in the molds at all at that point. We were so green to all of this stuff. But we actually produced a few pretty decent prosthetics and a couple of things like Mel Novak getting shot in the head, which I think was just the old. I think it was just the old pull gag. We just made the prosthetic. We cut out the plugs and we plopped them back in with some monofilament, and pulled them off, and pumped some blood. We had some crude bladders that we made and pumped some blood through the wound, and it worked pretty cool. I mean. I did a big chest appliance, and I remember I spent a day gluing all the hair. I had a really hairy chest. It's like I carved words into the guy's chest, but I had to pre-paint this thing, and I had to pre-glue all the hair on the piece.
Oh my God!
We got it on the guy. The guy sat around all day. They never got to it. And he went home and slept in the appliance and came back the next
my God.
That's low budget right there.
It was. But something, we were like shooting on a really cool stage in Culver City, just south of us, and it was the same sets that were used for Escape from Alcatraz.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. So somebody saw that they were available and went, let's write a script around those.
This place called GMT Studios, I guess. I don't know if they may have been made for the film for Escape from Alcatraz, and then because we just referred them to that as that. And, but, it was interesting because, I saw the film at a screening, and then I never saw it again. I couldn't find it anywhere. Nobody even heard of it. And it wasn't until years later from the internet I found that there were copies of it. And a guy named William Wilson back east had copies of it. Had that and another one that I did, another rare one called Speak of the Devil. And he burned copies for me, and now they're somewhere packed away in a box, and I still haven't seen them in ages.
Yeah, I actually still haven't seen that film. And when I wanted to rent it, it was always out, and they only had one copy of it, and it was the only video shop among 3 that decided to stock it in my area. So I may well check that out. Did you? I mean, before we jump onto the next thing on your CV, did you always want to sort of get into makeup and special effects? What actually drew you to that as a career?
Yeah, and who would you actually say your inspirations were for your makeup work? I mean, for me personally, it was people like Jack Pierce and Lon Chaney and Dick Smith and obviously Tom Savini.
It's funny because
But who would you say were your kind of?
I remember seeing Frankenstein on television when I was a kid, and that was like, but I'd seen King Kong first, and that really made a big impression on me. I saw that on my grandmother's house on her little television. Yeah. Huge impression on me, and I didn't know how it was done. But my brother bought an Aurora Frankenstein model kit, and I had never seen anything like that before. And this is when they were the original ones before they were glow in the dark and stuff. And that fascinated me. And then we saw that on television. But I'd also seen, before Equinox, I'd seen Godzilla, and one particular moment was, another thing that really got me into stop motion was coming home from school one day. They used to run feature films in the afternoon on like some of the major networks here. Like they weren't even really major. They were like Channel 7 would have their afternoon movie at 3:30, and I get home just after 3:30, so I'd be able to catch, whatever they were showing that interested me. And they were running The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and I came in on the scene
fantastic movie, yeah.
The blinded Cyclops is following Sinbad to the cliff and then falls off, and I saw that. I'm like, wow! And that it wasn't until Dave Allen mentioned Ray Harryhausen in that Equinox interview that then I knew about Ray Harryhausen. Then I started checking all that stuff out. And then later I started getting a little more interested in the makeup sort of stuff, like knowing who Dick Smith was and Jack Pierce.
Yeah.
And that stuff started getting more interesting after I saw Dawn of the Dead in the theater. When it first came out, and then Tom Savini was like a rock star at that point. And of course, everybody wants to be like that. If you can't be a real rock star, then you might as well do it slinging blood.
He kind of does have a rock star vibe, Tom Savini.
It's like everybody is. It's sort of like, Rick Baker and guys like that, Rob Bottin. So that generation really, kind of ushered in that whole mentality, because before it was like, you were wearing ties and lab coats, and so it's the gift came, and then it became T-shirts and long hair, So, but we, Ray Harryhausen, like I said, was such a huge influence. And then later I started, getting into it after Dawn of the Dead, and then The Howling came out, and with Rob Bottin.
Yeah, Rob Bottin.
The rock star, and the transformation scene was just astounding. And I had met John Landis on my birthday at Forey Ackerman's in 1976, and he stops over. Forey invited me over, for my birthday, and John Landis showed up, and he spent, like maybe 90 minutes or 2 hours talking to my friends and I about American Werewolf in London, and talking just the whole film, and like how Baker, we had this transformation scene that Rick Baker was going to try, and stuff like that. It was amazing. And then finally, it actually got released on my birthday here in the United States. But that was a big coincidence. But how fascinating to be able to come up with this stuff, and suddenly it became more immediate. Stop motion, takes some time, and I don't even know now if I had enough patience really to do it, because I'd done a few things as a kid, but makeup effects seemed more immediate, and that you could really, see the results of your work a lot quicker.
There's some stop motion in Primeval, though, right? From what?
Oh yeah, that's I had nothing to do with any of that. I
No.
wasn't. That was all Dave and Chris and the other guys. But I was really just running. Mark Rappaport, his shop Creature Effects, and Steve Neal, who had been working with Charlie all the way since the beginning and like in Laser Blast and stuff. They built all of the stuff. Steve did the hominid suits, and Mark did all the Yeti and the Yeti stuff and things like that. And then I got shipped over there and I'm glad I brought what I did, because otherwise I don't know what I would have done, because there was still a ton of work to do when I got over there, and luckily I had a little time to do it. But beyond that, with the stop motion thing, and then moving into makeup effects, I found that a lot of the companies are right here in the valley, and I can start calling them up and pestering them and seeing if I can get a job. And I was working at other places like for my dad and stuff also, but working in sheet metal doesn't really have the same allure as...
No, I'm sure it doesn't. Another one of your early credits that I also saw at the cinema was Serpent and the Rainbow.
Oh yeah,
I think this might be a French poster for it. I can remember a couple of pretty interesting makeup things in this movie. I wondered which bits of it you might have worked on, if you can remember that far back. I do appreciate.
I can certainly just tell me what it was, and I'll be at least maybe tell you who did it or.
There was, now I might be getting mixed up with a film called The Believers, which came out I think in '88, and it was either that or Serpent and the Rainbow that had a sequence where somebody had a spider bite on their face and they scratched the bite and the bite broke open and a load of spiders came out.
That was The Believers, actually.
I
remember that scene and being freaked out, because I think was it at Helen Shaver played the part, Martin Sheen's wife in the character.
That's right, yeah.
And that I thought that was a pretty amazing scene, because they just really those spiders just started popping out of the wound. Like going, that is really happening. That's not an effect. That's not and it was brilliant. I mean, Serpent the Rainbow, we did a pretty wild gag that had some periphery in on, was a dream sequence that Bill Pullman has where he sees a tiny little crone type mummy, a really shriveled up little character, female mummy, and she stretches her mouth open, and a gaboon viper.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Bites on it, grabs a hold of his face, and and that was an actual gaboon viper that we had life cast that over at Lance's. The animal trainer had brought this. I mean, those are like what are called a two-stick. And it had been milked, but we built this wooden box that you could lay the snake in, essentially. It had to be open on one end so the snake could, stick. But we mixed up a bunch of alginate, laid the guy some alginate in the box, and the animal trainer lays the snake in the box, alginate, and just sitting there. It's not really doing anything. It's pretty mellow, and we cover the whole thing up in alginate. We just dump a bunch of alginate on top of this thing.
Oh my god!
So it was able to withstand it. And the alginate set up pretty quick, but once that alginate set up, that snake started getting ornery and started constricting. You could see its tail starting to, it was getting stressed out. And the animal trainer walks up. He's got the bag open. He walks up, grabs the tail grabs the snake by the tail, just pulls it out of the alginate with a pop and drops it into the bag. and we had our mold of the viper. I remember guys like
amazing. That's amazing.
rather him than me. In this picture here, we got Bill Pullman and Kathy Tyson, who's actually a friend of mine.
Nice.
She just came to see my last play. I've met her quite recently. We bumped into each other over the years because we both live in North London and have various mutual friends and this kind of thing. Very talented actress. Did you have something to do with the sort of little body in the box here? Was that one of your creations?
I believe that was that little crone, if I'm not mistaken. My picture's kind of small, but I think that's the little crone because that casket looks pretty small, and that would be that's the same character that pops out of or like the snake pops out of the mouth.
Yeah. So that would have been one of your creations, I suspect.
I was involved in it. I mean, bits and pieces on that because James Cagle did a lot of the sculpting on the show, and I was like, I was a young kid. I mean, I was mostly making molds and casting pieces and doing fiberglass, and we did those giant arms that stick out of the the dream sequence. There's those giant zombie arms, and I remember we made those things, and Lance showing us how to do the little cable control device to make the wrists move, and it was it was a really good old Paul Winfield.
Late great Paul Winfield, who was in Terminator.
Here's two things with both Bill Pullman and Paul Winfield. I did help Lance do the live cast for both Bill Pullman and Paul Winfield. I helped do both of their live casts, but in the film, Lance tasked me, in the pre-production, with making Bill Pullman's dummy head for the scene where he's buried in the coffin. Yeah. The spider on his face. The real spider was on a dummy head of Bill Pullman, and then they would shoot close-ups of him, and they would have little like pipe cleaner type spider legs that they would manipulate in for the scene for the closer.
See, I knew there was a spider in this movie. That's why I get this and The Believers mixed up.
Yeah. But those wide shots where he's with the spider literally crawling on his face in the coffin, that's a dummy head that I made of Bill Pullman. That was like the first like real dummy head that I made for a film. After Demon Cop, I did one that ended up in a movie called Demon Cop that was like probably the bluest severed head you've ever seen. Sky blue.
Any other memories of working on Serpent and the Rainbow before we move on?
I'll tell you like how I got hired on the job. I been working at Effects Lab for a little bit on a couple of shows, and everybody at the Make Effects Lab went up to Kenny Myers' shop for Return of the Living Dead 2. And so, and people liked me at Make Effects Lab, so they said, "Hey, we're going up there, so why don't you come up and work with us up there?" So they gave me Kenny's info to contact him, and I went up there. I mean, all the way, miles and miles away from here, and I drove out there in the middle of nowhere, and he was just in a bad mood or something, and he looked at my portfolio and he just kind of threw it down, and "Nah, I'm not going to hire you," or something like that, and I was kind of a little dejected. I mean, drove like 40 miles to get to his place. It seemed like, maybe not that long, but still, so I was kind of like dejected a bit, and I drove back into the valley into Van Nuys, and I had already met Lance Anderson. I'd interviewed with him once before, and he said, very nice man. He said, something, if you have some new stuff in your book, I'd love to see it. So I went to a local gas station, made a phone call from a payphone, and just a few blocks from where Lance's studio was, and I told him the whole thing, and he said, "You have something? Come on over." And I went over and showed him my stuff, and he says, if you don't hear from me tonight, be here at 8 a.m. tomorrow. If I call you tonight, don't show up tomorrow. I'll tell you when to show up. But at that point, I knew I was hired. And it was like a 3 month gig, and we did Michael Jackson's Moonwalker also, even though some of the stuff that we did was replaced by Rick Baker. So
So that was two jobs for the price of one, effectively. And this is one of the effect shots that you were involved in that you were talking about earlier for the dream sequence.
Lance was instrumental in the dog thing, in the thing when it went over to Stan Winston's when Rob couldn't do it.
Yeah,
was one of the sculptors. He was also the puppeteer on that gag. So, but Lance said, like, I mean, an amazing man. I mean, the man didn't. He was 40. He just got a general contractor's license for the construction field. Decided to go to makeup school, and by 50 had his own studio and had already worked on a ton of shows with Stan Winston and Tom Berman. And from what I understand, he and Ellis Berman were in the Marines together, and that's how he sort of fell into it. So
those army contacts always
but Lance
was good to hang on to those relationships.
Yeah, but he was also a very good artist also, so it was easy for him to. But listen, I mean, when you can even be at that age and you can jump into a new career.
Yeah.
So going up the CV, I've got two I want to ask you about here. But Inside Man, anytime you've got a question as well, just let me know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean,
I got Shocker and Robojock, who I want to talk about. Sorry, go on, mate.
Yeah, I was just going back to the makeup side of things. So, in terms of preference between conventional animation and makeup design and or animatronics, what would you say that you favor the most? What would you say that you steer or have steered towards the most in terms of your personal preference?
Yeah, I love stop motion models for the engineering behind them and building a ball and socket armature and running your latex and hoping that it doesn't go bad on you and you have to do it again. But I love all of that sort of stuff. It's just so fascinating to me. And on the makeup end, what I liked is I was something. A lot of people I work with, and there's nothing against them, but it's like, people gravitate towards this sometimes because they're into blood and gore and mutilation, and it's sort of like the whole idea of that fascinates them. And for me, it was always the technical challenge of pulling off a gag. Like, what do you have? Where does the guy have to be off frame to do this, or or to pull a cable, or to, anything like that? That, how does the camera have to be set up? The editor, how does the editor come into play in the scene? And that's what always fascinated me about that stuff, because
the kind of sleight of hand, I suppose you'd call it, the grand illusion, the
little Tom Savini.
Do you have do you have a particular? I've
still got my Grand Illusions book actually lurking around somewhere.
Oh, I haven't had those in ages, but I remember them distinctly. Yeah, both of them.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular gag that you've done on a movie that you're especially proud of, or that maybe was especially complicated to pull off, but it did work?
Boy, there's a lot of stuff I did that I would say that I'm not proud of. But
well, we don't have to go into those, but but is there one particular one that really stands at the top of the memory? Wow, that was hard, but we did it.
Yeah, one comes to mind was a show. I did like 3 movies back to back with Jason Connery. And I love Jason. He's wonderful. I mean,
cool.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy.
Yeah, he's a really super nice guy. We're doing like the vampire movie together. He had to come over to my house and get teeth, and then he tells me, "Hey, my next show is this Sci-Fi Channel movie," and I go, "Guess what? I'm doing the creature for it." and we spent like a month in Utah together, and then the final show that we did was another like vampire film called Brotherhood of Blood, and it was for these are the guys that wrote. They were working for Uwe Boll and a couple of German guys, really, really nice guys. But this movie had Ken Foree and Sid Haig and Victoria Tennant.
Do you know roughly what year this was?
Oh, this would have been around 2005 when we shot it, so it was probably released in 2006. It was part of, well, here in the U.S. it was part of Sam Raimi's distribution.
Was it Dante's Inferno?
No, it was called Brotherhood of Blood.
Oh no, I've got the Thirst Blood War.
The Thirst Blood War. Different. That was the one I did. That was the one that I did with the first one I did with Jason. The second one was Stan Lee's Lightspeed for Sci-Fi Channel,
right?
And then that third one was the Brotherhood of Blood.
Yeah.
So like after working with Jason on 2 films, I got to kill him on the third one, and had this gag where they wanted him like eviscerated. They wanted to be like, gutted. I didn't have all the intestines falling out because it was such a quick gag, but I built like this double-layered fiberglass shell for him, and then covered that with a silicone skin, and there was like a channel inside of it where we could put the cut-off blade, and I had it rigged with tubing, and the blade rigged with tubing, and we took it to set. It was, as a matter of fact, it was like the only day I was able to make it to set on Brotherhood of Blood. And we did the gag, and they got it in one take. And I was like really proud of that because it meant that I could then go home, and relax. Racking, building of stuff and hoping it works. And I built a few gags like that on that show, and it was really, nice. But little things like that, especially when, I'll be honest with you, a lot of the stuff I'm doing so quickly, I don't have the time to test it. And that's like, I'm kind of nerve-wracking. And then if it works, you're pleased, to made it through the day.
I mean, in sort of modern times, because you've been in the game for a bit of a while, and racked up a fair old number of credits. When you come to set, is it? I mean, obviously, it depends on the demands of the script and the director, but is it more the norm that these days, because of the breadth and depth of experience that you've got, you can look at the script and look at your bag of tricks and go, okay, we're going to use that for this for that, and as opposed to, shit, I've got to think of a new one for this.
Well, it's like my bag of tricks seems to have gotten pretty light these days. I mean, I had studios and stuff like that, and then over the years, I worked on a lot of really low budget short film stuff and produced a web series with Jack Klugman and stuff like that, but I never really made a lot of money on that stuff. So, I mean, things are pretty modest at this point, but when it comes down to being able to come up with something on the fly, that can be kind of dicey, but if I'm able to prepare it, I did a film called Abruptio lately, and a lot of set stuff I'm not doing these days because just making the stuff alone on the schedules and budgets, just wears you out, and the last thing that you want to do is be on set and not all together there. If I have to be there, then I try to work it out with them, but a lot of times I work it out with production beforehand to have people there to make sure that the stuff gets done and done right. But in an Abruptio, it was like that. I was making these puppets, and like one puppet a month, essentially, and I'd hand off all these puppets to them, and then they go off and do whatever they wanted with them, and I find that works out pretty well for me these days, because I need to be a bit of an old man. It's like.
What's the earliest? Makeup are always there. They're the first ones in. What's the earliest call time you've ever had to be on a set?
I remember one that we did a 36-hour day at Optic Nerve Studios on an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh my God!
And we were supposed to leave the shop and drive all the way down to, oh my gosh, down by LAX to do where they had it wasn't even that far, but still it was like over the hill to where the production office and sets were, like down Santa Monica or near there, and I lucked out because my house was on the way. I was able to stop and get a shower, but I never even got any sleep. And then I got to set and work for another 11 hours.
Damn.
So, and I think our set call for that was, I think it was like 4 a.m. maybe. And, but
I hope you make some good overtime on that 36-hour shoot.
Well, those are all straight hours, but I mean, but it's still, it was still a good paycheck regardless. But but still, I mean, coupled with the 36-hour day before that, it felt like the call time was 3 days before.
Sure. So, I've got a question here in the chat because you did an uncredited makeup role on Tombstone, which actually is one of my favorite westerns, not least because of the performances of the cast. Oh, yeah. And I've actually done a western top 5 westerns episode, and I've also done a special on Tombstone and the Kevin Costner. We did a compare and contrast the two movies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, with Matthew Holmes, who's a Western film director. That's a great episode, people. If you check that out, it's on the channel. So David Macy's question is, and there are many tales from the set of Tombstone, because of course that was George P. Cosmatos, who was known to be a bit of a drunken tyrant, and by then he was coming towards the end of his career. Do you have any tales or particular memories of Tombstone?
Well, something, unfortunately I never made it to set on that one again because the David Atherton was the makeup department head on the show, and he and I were friends from years before working on shows together at Lance Anderson's. And when Dave would get a show on his own, like Silent Tongue with Sam Shepard and stuff, he would hire my garage studio out to make the stuff. So I was essentially making the prosthetics. And for the original script, when Kevin Jarre was directing it still, there was a ton of stuff. I mean, it was like we had a guy's guts blasted out. We had a lot of really graphic content that was cut out for when George P. Cosmatos came in. They still had a few things, which was good because at least they didn't cut everything out. But we spent a month or so, maybe, or even 6 weeks, or maybe close to 8 weeks, just making stuff in my garage. Prosthetics. I'll never forget Michael Biehn showing up a day early for his face cast, and I had done a prosthetic for him in the film where he gets shot in the head, and that contained a little air line for air pressure, and they get blasted off and then pump the blood out. And he showed up a day early, and Dave and I left the shop in a wreck because we were just so busy, and the shop was an absolute disaster area, and we were going to clean the place up. And that day, I actually had to drive out to do a body cast for the show. So I was getting prepped for that when my door to my studio's open, and there's like a silhouetted figure standing there suddenly. Hi, I'm Michael. I'm here for my face cast. I'm like, you're a day early, but let's get this done. So, and luckily I only had to do half of his face, really. So I had to do the upper half of it because he was growing a beard at the time, and I think even I may have still stuck, some of his stubble. I think it got some alginate stuck in there, but he's been pretty. Michael Biehn's been pretty candid about his struggle with drink and other things, and that he was going through kind of, I think, fairly early on in his career. How was he with doing a long face cast and stuff like that? Did you? Because makeup artists always get to spend time with the actors. So there's really cool. I mean, and I think it probably didn't hurt that he lived close to me at that point, so he didn't have to really go too far. And he had a writing lesson he had to get to, and so I was able to get it out before he could, had to really get to the writing lesson. So I pleased him pretty much, and he never was really a problem at all. I mean, I was, and I know his wife Jennifer also, and I mean, I like them both, and I saw him do a recent interview, and he actually, the way he reflects about everything now, I think he seems like a really nice guy. Gone through a journey, but we were all much younger then, and things were just so much wilder at that point. I mean, it was. I mean, look back on it now, it feels like the old west, you know.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
That was.
Can we go back to you getting hired by Charlie Band, the man behind Empire Pictures, who nearly bought a castle in Italy and decided
he
to
he bought his castle.
start a Hollywood studio effectively in Italy as a rogue independent, and made many of my, I guess I call them sort of, they're not, there isn't one film of his where I go, oh my God, that's one of my favorite films of all time. But there are several films of his that I will still sit down and stick on again.
I mean, to be honest with you, I still enjoy watching some of those old films. I mean, Charlie and I don't really talk anymore, but I still like films, and I owe him a great deal of gratitude, and I still respect him a lot. I mean, it's like, I mean, we had a bit of a falling, but you know, something you look back on it in the career, and you think of all the things that he allowed me to do, and the opportunities, and it's like, I mean, how can you not have some soft spot, you know? But getting hired for Empire was a matter of going to John Buechler's a number of times. I lived close to where his original studio was, but now he'd moved to a place over in North Hollywood, and the guy I went to school with got hired on Reanimator. And so I knew that I could get a job over there, just not at that point, and it still took a little bit of time. But I'd go in and interview, and I'd show him stuff, and so that's great, and come back later for another...
Oh, lost your audio, Jeff. Let me stop sharing for a sec in case that's the cause. Jeff, we've lost your audio. We've lost your audio. Lost your sound. Lost your sound. Oh, I don't think you can hear me. Hold on a sec. Let's. Sorry, people that are watching, but we have lost Jeff's audio, and we had issues with it. Inside Man, can you still hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah,
we've lost Jeff's audio, and he's still chatting away. Hang on. Let me. Hold on. Okay.
I think. While you're kind of sorting the tech out, I'll just give people a little bit more of an understanding about Charles Band's Empire, and then Full Moon, if that's okay. Just kind of
no, do that. I'm going to put you on solo layout for a second.
Yeah.
And talk about Empire, and I'll
so Charles Band, he really kind of started. His father was a director, Albert Band, director of various movies. He also co-directed with his father, but got in at the ground floor of the whole home video market. So he opened a couple of stores, which were reasonably successful, and then he thought, you know, what the hell, I'm hiring these movies out, I'd much rather be making them. So he got some money together by certain means, but he got some money together.
Can you elaborate further on the certain means? Is this in the book?
Let's just okay. Let's just say that he actually borrowed a certain amount of money from some very unsavory people,
nefarious parties.
So some rather unsavory people who then, when they called in the debt, proceeded to kind of firebomb his place, and so of course he had to come up with the money for that. To kind of straighten out that debt. But Empire Pictures, I mean, the history with Empire Pictures is long and varied, but he, as Lance had already said, they used to sell the movies on the posters. There were hundreds and hundreds of posters that were, in essence, just ideas. They were just titles, just ideas. and he had a couple of guys that would do some amazing artwork for him. And some of these posters really are genuine works of art, very similar to what Menachem Golem and Yoram Globus did, the way they pre-sold their movies over at the Cannes Film Festival and MyFed, and yeah, so he was pre-selling movies. He bought Dino Città, or Dino De Laurentiis' rundown film studio just outside of Rome.
Yeah.
And he kind of brought that back to life. There were tons of movies that were made there. He bought himself a castle in Italy, in Umbria, I think it was. Things kind of went a little south with the studio, and he had to sell his back catalogue of Empire movies, which he was pretty upset with, having to do that, as well as the studio. And got back into got back into the movie making business after a short stint, and that's when he formed Full Moon. There's if you're really, really interested in this story, I mean, there are two amazing books. One of them is Charles Band's autobiography, Confessions of a Puppet Master, and it really is a warts and all, down to earth, absolutely no holds barred telling of his story, and he tells it so eloquently. And there's another one, I'd say it was more of a companion piece, and it's called It Came from the Video Aisle. And it's all
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the rise of Full Moon, and all of the straight to video kind of movies. It's a great book. It's a really good book, and a real nice little sort of potted history of all of Full Moon's works. But Confessions of a Puppet Master is a superb book.
So
So
Jeff, I'm assuming Jeff still can't hear us, but I'm talking to him on the private chat.
yeah,
we still can't hear him. Jeff, I'm going to suggest you try logging back out and logging back in the way we mentioned earlier, and Gary and I will fill in and talk about our favorite Empire pictures while you do that. Does that sound like a suggestion? Can you hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Don't know if you can hear me. Let me I might have to type that out.
yeah.
Inside Man, which are your fave of the Charlie Band movies?
I got to be honest, I got a real soft spot for Zone Troopers.
Ah,
It's I rewatched it again not that long ago, and I've really got a soft spot for it. And I remember the poster, the Empire poster for it, when it appeared in the Cannes Film Festival, Screen International. And it was this amazing kind of futuristic kind of army running through the darkness. They looked almost like the Imperial snow troopers, with these big sort of lasery guns, and there was the title Zone Troopers. And I thought, yeah, this is going to be amazing. And of course, I saw the movie and I thought, hang on a minute, there was nothing like that from that poster that made it into that movie. But nonetheless, yeah, sorry, mate, go on.
No, I'm just I've got a copy of Zone Troopers,
Yeah,
which has got the NAF video poster on it.
yeah.
Jeff is just logging out, and he's going to try and get back in. Yeah, this was the poster that was in the video store, kind of a spoof of the. But you're saying that there was a earlier poster for Zone Troopers that was.
Yeah.
And I think Jeff worked on this. Pretty sure
Yeah,
he
yeah,
did.
I think so. I'm pretty sure he did, actually.
Hopefully, guys will be able to confirm that shortly. I don't know if that was an early poster for it. Maybe that certainly isn't what the film is. Can tell you now. Tim Thomason, who we've got an interview. We got an interview with Tim Thomason. I did it a few weeks ago. He's an actual character actor hero of mine, and I can't tell you how absolutely pleased and proud I
It's
was
an
to interview
amazing,
him.
it's an amazing interview. It really is a good interview. Hats off for that one. Seriously, it's a really good interview. If no one's seen it,
I think he
you've
was.
got
I
to
think
check
he
it out.
was quite chuffed that someone had taken such a massive interest in his career.
Mm.
And I just thought, I always loved him. I just thought he's such a naturally gifted
Yeah,
actor.
yeah, it really is. Yeah,
That's the set from Zone Trooper. This set I was impressed with. I quite
yeah,
liked it.
yeah.
We're gonna try and bring Jeff back in. We'll see if it's gonna work, people. We're gonna try and bring him back in. So Jeff, you're currently muted. So if you just want to unmute yourself, let's see.
There I am.
Hey, it's working.
Hey,
Hurrah!
Oh, the good old just unplug everything and reboot it works.
So don't touch anything in case you cut your sound off again.
My hands are like way back here. I'm not touching anything.
Did you work on Zone Troopers? I think did you work on Zone Troopers?
No, that was just before me. My friend Mike Moore did, though. I was a little jealous over it, but
yeah,
I like that one a lot. That's a really fun film.
It is a fun movie, and Tim Thomason's in it, of course, who I did an interview with a few weeks ago. Now you were just telling us your story of how the first film that you got involved with Charlie Band was Arena.
You know something? I'll just to reiterate, I interviewed with John Beekler a lot, and when I was living behind James Cummins' place, John called me one night. I was living in this duplex behind with rooming with and a friend, and we a phone rings, and it was John Beekler hiring me onto Cellar Dweller, and maybe it was the following. No, it was a few hours later. He called me and said, "Well, that's scratched because my budget just got cut." So a few months went by, and that was after I worked at Lance Anderson's. I went over to John's, and they were doing Garbage Pail Kids movie and Prison at the same time, and John needed extra help, and lo and behold, I was hopefully I can do this right. Hopefully, John. John thought basically, hopefully, I'd be a good fit with the crew, and I got hired that day, and before I knew it, I was working on both of those shows, and then a few weeks went by, and because I was the only person in the shop, I did Deadly Weapon, which started out as Laser Blast 2.
yeah.
Oh, Deadly Weapon was Laser Blast 2.
It was originally, yeah, and then they wrote out the aliens and stuff and made it more sort of naturalistic. Michael Miner, who had co-wrote RoboCop, came on to direct, and he wanted the story to be a little more naturalistic and less fantastical, and that's why they sort of got rid of the sci-fi element for the more military angle for the gun.
So I think one of the things you did on Arena was you did the makeup for Armin Shimmerman, who would later play Quark in Deep Space Nine. Is that correct?
Is correct.
Well, always do research on my guests.
Yeah, you know that.
So I think we have a still of you doing that. Now, do forgive me, this might be wrong, but I think this is the right one. So I can show. This is from Jeff's personal collection. Framed autographed versions of them available for a mere $50. So I'm kidding, of course, but I'm sure Jeff can arrange one if you want.
I could use the bucks. You can split it with me.
Be your promotional agent here, Jeff. But that's you working with Armin. Is that quite right?
Yeah, that's me plopping his teeth in. A guy named Patrick Simmons sculpted the appliance. I started doing a version of Weasel that John Beekler had designed, and he had like this really long pointed snout. It's gonna be like a mechanical head, and I just wasn't getting it. It just wasn't looking right, and then they decided this, doing a mechanical head for the character is nuts. Let's do it as a makeup. And in a few months before this happened, a guy named Jeff Kennemore, who was working at the shop, and he'd worked on Rob Bottin's and stuff, he sculpted the Quark makeup, or the original prototype character. I can't remember the name of those characters now, but Armin was the first character in that race, and so I got to see that stuff beforehand, and then lo and behold, Armin is cast in Arena as Weasel, and I was tasked to do his makeup, and we turned out to be the best friends. I mean, he's just a wonderful guy, and we haven't seen each other in ages, but yeah, it worked out so well that when it came time to do his stunt scene, he had to leave town because he was going back to the U.S. as his character on Beauty and the Beast had been made reoccurring. So they need him immediately, and he has to leave before his stunt scenes, or his sort of like death scenes in Arena, are shot with him up in the above with the explosions going off and stuff like that. So I went through helping production cast that character. We went through. I may have even met some of the Del Aqua brothers, but nobody seemed right for it. They're too stocky, or too tall, or too wasn't going to work. Again, Walter Massey, who was our production manager, he looked at me and Armin next to each other, and we're like the same height and the same build. He goes, Jeff, you play Weasel. And Mike Deke is standing next to me, and he puts his hands up, the hand up like the universal money sign, hey, Walter. And I got a nice bump out of doing that stunt scene. Got to do a stunt, this fight scene with Hamilton Camp, and I did the fall, and and I got decked out fully in the makeup. It was a lot of fun. It was like a cool experience. I think we're still here, aren't we?
Sorry, I forgot I was muted there for a second. Sorry, guys.
I could hear some voice, so I thought, okay, so I haven't dropped out just again.
No. You're all good. I was just saying that I've never heard nothing but nice things about Armin Shimmerman in the industry, and so it's good to hear that your experience with him have been.
He lived so close to me over in Van Nuys that I remember we got back, and the following year I had Thanksgiving with him over at his place, him and his wife Kitty, and it was so nice. I mean.
So did you live in Italy for a big period, or would you just go back and forth as movies came up with Charlie, or how did that work?
I only worked on Arena. I went to work for Empire because I wanted to go to Italy. At the same time we were doing Arena was when John Buechler got hired to direct Friday the 13th Part 7. And John pulled me in his office one day, and he said they'd already picked the crew to go to Italy, and they had one person they couldn't decide upon. They had one person picked, and they couldn't go. And so they had a void they needed to be filled, and John pulled me in his office one day and gave me, boy, what did he say? He said something like, we've got these two films going, and I'm going to give you an option. He says, either you can stay here in LA and sculpt Jason, or you can go to Italy on Arena. And I was like, oh boy, that was like a really tough call, but I wanted to go to Italy. I mean, that's like I'd never been out of the country before, and I figured, something, Ray Harryhausen wanted to go to Italy, so I'm going to go to Italy too and experience it, and imagine what the Emir looked like on the Colosseum, and all of that stuff. And it was great. I mean, it's such a wonderful experience. And there was all of us over there, and Screaming Mad George and Steve Wang were both over there doing their thing and on the show. And I mean, we're just a bunch of young guys, unsupervised, and wild.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
But do you think though, Jeff, that just kind of popping back to what you kind of said at the very beginning, when you were talking about Rob Bottin and Rick Baker, and guys like that. But did it, and Tom Savini, of course. Um, but do you think it kind of, being a special effects makeup guy was almost like a kind of a counterculture thing? Because everybody was a very, very similar kind of, very similar kind of look, very similar kind of aesthetic, and very, very similar kind of mindset. You think it was kind of almost like or it appears to be anyway, a kind of a counterculture generation.
I agree with that. That makes sense to me because, I mean, I was too young to be a hippie,
Mm.
but I remember all of that stuff going on, and I think because of all of that, what was going on as kids, and we were, and a lot of us, it's weird. I mean, a lot of us had a healthy obsession with this sort of stuff. It wasn't like it didn't take over our lives to a degree that we weren't living it. I mean, I don't wake up and eat my horror Cheerios every morning. And but it was sort of that because, and here's probably one of the best examples of that was John Buechler's shop, MMI, when they were shooting all of those films in Italy for Empire.
Yeah,
they made up some T-shirts for the crew, and I would have loved to have had one of these. I wish I'd worked there at this time, but it was sort of like it was the MMI World Tour T-shirts with the names of the films, kind of like they were different bands.
Yeah.
And, here's all the guys with their their leather jackets and long hair and stuff, and they go to see them wearing shirts and think they were rock stars.
Yeah.
And I mean, they, there are some pretty interesting stories. But yeah, it really was sort of that because I mean, Dick Smith, as straight laced as he was, he's sort of that counterculture attitude because I mean, he was going to be a dentist. I mean,
that's right. I'd heard that.
He goes into the military and he comes out going, something to hell with that, looking at the rest of my life. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And, and it's sort of like, it was sort of, maybe, I don't even know if that was the beginning of that sort of attitude where really you set out on your own path, to find what interests you and hopefully you'll find some peace and joy with it. It's never that way completely because it's like everything is like a microcosm of society as a whole.
Yeah.
You got the good and the bad.
I think perhaps, I suppose the beginning of the kind of US counterculture was the sort of post-Vietnam era. That's when we kind of really got to see that. With people like Tom Savini in particular, who I love Tom Savini's work. One of the few of the kind of big makeup guys that I've not met, unfortunately, but would love to. But he kind of epitomizes that sort of counterculture, particularly with the stuff that he did with George Romero and Bill Lustig.
It's so funny you bring that up because he was slated originally to do Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
And,
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
He was only because he got called up in the military service that he had to turn that down.
Right. Interesting.
And then went to Vietnam as a combat photographer. And that's sort of where he became the Tom Savini we all know at this point because all of that experience gave him experience.
Yeah. God, I didn't know he'd served as a combat photographer. That's that's amazing.
Rick apparently was planning on that himself when he went into the military in World War II, and he said, "I didn't realize they got shot like clay pigeons."
Yeah.
He said very lucky he got pulled into Frank Capra's unit to do, post-production special effects work on like military,
Yeah.
like training films and things like that, and
Right.
magazine covers for Stars and Stripes and or Yank magazine and stuff like that. So
I've got to ask you about As Good as It Gets and Greg's pulped face here. This is what the inside man looks like on a Saturday morning after a Friday night's Friday
That's
night drink.
the image of me. Yeah.
That is very close to you.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming this makeup, this incredible makeup on this shot is your work.
I sculpted and molded all of those prosthetics, and this was for As Good as It Gets. This was the best picture winner and best Jack Nicholson and Helen Hunt both won best actor and actress.
Yeah.
For the Oscars for this film, and unfortunately, Greg Kinnear, who played this part, didn't get nominated. Also, or no, I'm sorry, he did get nominated, and did he win? He might have won also.
I'm not sure if he won. I'll find out. But how long did it take to do those pieces?
Well, those were some very small pieces cast in gelatin, and I got hired by a lady named Michelle Burke, and she did Quest for Fire.
And
amazing.
Oscar for Bram Stoker's Dracula, and she was a pretty heavy hitter also, and I'd met her years and years before, and again, she was one of those people that said she would hire me at some point, and then it just took a while, but eventually I had done one show with her prior, and then when As Good as It Gets came up, she hired me and another guy named Chris Bergschneider to come in, and eventually another guy named Tom Irvin came in and helped us when we were making the pieces, but it was, brought Greg in. And here's a bit of trivia, though. When Greg Kinnear came in for his life cast, that was the day that we both realized that we were working at Empire Pictures at the same time.
Oh, really?
Greg working in the office at Empire Pictures at the same time I was working for Beekler, and we both had a good laugh over that. It was just like a production. He's just like an office guy.
Was he complaining about his paychecks being late?
Yeah. We didn't get that far, but it was very interesting to hear that, and we kind of we're able to bond over a little of something that that happened to us in the past severally. But
well, you were right. He did get nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but sadly he did not win.
He did not win. That's right. But and at the same token, and something that was really the only special makeup in the film, and because it was a pretty straight film, it didn't get a makeup nom for the Oscars that year. But again, Michelle hired me to come in and sculpt the pieces, and we worked with the doctor on getting the look of the stitches and the swollen eye and all of that stuff down, and maybe I think it was about 3 weeks worth of work or so, maybe to do all the stuff, maybe a month at the most.
Because I remember when this has a really good reveal in the movie. I remember that.
Yeah.
And you suddenly turn and you see him like that for the first time, and there's somebody in the scene with him who jumps. And I remember everybody in the audience, like, you just saw the heads go like that in front of you. It was a pretty effective moment. He lost out, by the way, to Robin Williams for Good Will Hunting.
Oh, sure. I was just proud of having involvement in this, and what a lucky break it was. I was very proud of those stitches also, because sculpting those and getting them to look right, and it was a major milestone for me at that point. And then her and Ed French went in and applied them on set. And it was because of that makeup, Ed gave me a call, and I worked with him almost exclusively for like 10 years after that. So it led to more work, and a really long standing friendship with another really amazing makeup artist,
You've worked on 2 iconic TV shows, and I want to make sure that we have time to talk about those. So I'm going to jump on both of those now. One of those was one of my favorite sci-fi shows, which was Babylon 5, which is, I think a lot of people have rediscovered that show recently, especially through YouTube blogs and people talking about it. And the thing that makes it very strong is the world building, and the scripts for it are absolutely fantastic, even if some of the CGI is a little bit dated. It's interesting because you worked on the pilot, which was, from what I recall, from what I recall, that was 98. From what I recall from our previous conversation, it was like you worked on the pilot. That was a bit like you arrived there. Shit, what's happening? This is all a bit of a mess. And then you came back later and you worked on 2 full seasons of the show, and then several of the kind of made-for-TV movies. I think 3 or 4 of those. Yeah. So do you just want to sort of tell us the whole story of B5 from working on the pilot, and then the contrast of that to working on seasons 4 and 5? I think you did.
A guy named John Criswell and 2 guys, John Criswell and Larry Finch, they had secured the pilot for Babylon 5, and there's a lot of really interesting ideas. I mean, Criswell's just an amazing animatronics guy and designer, and he happens to be, I believe, grandson of Criswell. The Ed Wood Criswell.
Really? Yeah. You're kidding?
What?
No, I am not kidding. He is related. I don't know if he's a grandson, but he's related to him. But they had gotten the show, and they got to the point where they needed some extra help in their lab, and they were close to where I lived, so I went over and did maybe a week or 2 of prep before going to set, and it was just really rough. It was really hot. It was like, I think everybody was kind of like, at that point had already been on their, no amount of coffee was going to wake these guys up. And so, we get the stuff prepped, we go to set, and I made a huge mistake. Well, here's something that I wasn't aware of. I was supposed to bring appliances for Delenn to set. Nobody even bothered to tell me that it was my responsibility to pack them up, because everything was packed up, and we got to set and found that the appliances weren't there for Delenn. So that was the first big mistake. And it made like no craft service on set, and no coffee minor at that point. But somebody got the pieces and brought them up, and we got them in. And honestly, I just wasn't really getting the makeup. It was really tough.
Yeah.
It was sort of because I was kind of thrown in without any real knowledge of what I was doing, and I thought the edges on the pieces were a bit thick, and they're kind of blending off, hard. And Greg Aronowitz came in, and he and I sort of tackled it together and whipped up something that looked good. And
sorry to interrupt. Is it the norm that you would, just as a makeup artist generally, especially for a sci-fi show, is it the norm that you would actually read the script so you would have a sense of the world and the creation and what you're doing? Is that the norm?
Well, it's normal on every show, really. I mean, if you're like in any position of responsibility, reading a script really helps, because then you're kind of aware of what you got to do. Even if you're a small part and you just get the script pages that you're dealing with, then you're.
But it sounds like you didn't get to do that here. You were kind of in it.
No, that was none of my responsibility. I was supposed to do the Delenn makeup, but nobody bothered to tell me you gotta bring the pieces with you, because we all met at Criswell's and left, and everything was packed up and ready to go, but nobody ever bothered to pack up those pieces. Well, that was sort of a minor thing, but we got the pieces and we got them in there, but honestly, I just didn't have a good feeling about it. I thought the show really wasn't going to go anywhere. I mean, I didn't say that to anybody, and that was my one and only day on the pilot. It was just for that test.
Yeah. Did you meet Straczynski when you worked on the pilot?
No, then, but not till later. Later, I did meet him, and it was so odd because I didn't really tell anybody about any of that stuff at the beginning. Besides, I was a pretty low man on the totem pole, so it didn't really matter.
Sure.
on the pilot.
So you went off and you did loads of other work, which we'll come back to if we have time.
Sure.
And then
I went to work at Optic Nerve Studios. I had my studio open for a while, and then I shut that down. And looking for work, I ended up over at John Volich's place. And John is just a wonderful guy. I mean, I really, really miss him a lot. He passed away a few years ago. But we were working on Buffy and Babylon 5 at the time, and I think we had
that's the other show I'll come to after this.
Yeah,
on Buffy.
we had a few shows in at that time, but on Babylon we had a supervisor, another friend of mine, and he I don't know, he did something that really kind of irked John. It really wasn't. It really kind of, and he ended up getting let go. And I just happened to be like the next guy on the list, and I got.
You got the call.
I'll tell the real story of how I got put in charge, because it's a bit long, and it also.
No.
It doesn't put a straight line either, but I got put in charge. Babylon 5. But for a minute, it looked like I was going to be fired.
So you were on these 2 seasons, 4 and 5.
Yeah, I got hired on the last 6 episodes of the 4th season and the entire 5th season, and plus the TV movies.
Now that's a bit of a tumultuous time for Babylon 5, because in order to save money, I know the story of how Ron Thornton and the effects team all got fired, and that literally, officers of the court came in and seized all the computers, and they all got let go. And one of the producers set up an effects company to take over all of that. And there was a lot of legal wrangling back and forth over who owned the 3D models that they created. And so I imagine it must have been a weird time to be working on the show, because also at one point they thought it was the 3rd season was going to be the last. Then they thought the 4th season was going to be the last. And so,
well, that was when I came in during the 4th season. I mean, that happens regularly with a lot of shows. Even a show that's a hit can still be dicey. It may not get renewed. It's like, it's kind of a weird mentality, but the stations, the networks will do that. But as far as Babylon 5 goes, it was the same story. It was essentially, they get to an end of a season, and you wouldn't know if you were actually going to be going on to another season.
Sure.
Until, a certain point, and then you're jumping into it. But on the 4th season, and since they had planned on, they said, we're not doing the 5th season. It was, the whole deal was the UPN was dumping the show, and UPN was sort of going under, I think, at the time or something. I can't remember exactly what the whole thing was, but they were dumping the show, and they they weren't going under, but they were dumping the show, and it wasn't until the last minute that TNT came in and picked it up. And so we were sort of like in the dark, and they went ahead and shot the final episode of the 5th season as the last episode of the 4th season, just so they would be able to have some closure to the show. They were going to skip an entire season and then go to the last episode at the end of the 4th season.
Right.
And then, so lo and behold, TNT picks it up, and suddenly we're off to the races again.
So when you were making it, it was all at this jacuzzi factory. It was formerly a jacuzzi sales warehouse or something.
Oh yeah.
Located away from the main studios. I found it on Google Earth. It's still being used for filming occasionally, because there was a load of trucks and things.
It was so nice, yeah.
What can you tell us? What was the makeup department like there, and what's the typical day on Babylon 5? What time did you have to arrive? Were you on call all day doing makeup fixes? How did it work?
I think I get home at midnight. I'll start at the end of the day.
Okay, so you're arriving home from work at midnight.
Yeah, I would have to, depending on what the call time was, when actors were needed, because it was my responsibility to also make sure stuff got to set. So sometimes I'd get a couple hours of sleep, or maybe 4 hours of sleep or something, and then I'd go back to the studio, get all the pieces that were made the day before. For the show, they'd have everything set up for me to pick up, and I would take them to the set and put everything, all the masks where they needed to be, and all the prosthetics where they needed to be. And they
So
had
those pieces were not made on the the jacuzzi factory where the show was filmed.
No,
They were made at another studio place. You got to go and pick them up and then take them to set.
That warehouse was really close to where the Babylon 5 production was going on. Lucky, because when you're working on Buffy, you're driving 30 miles, and Babylon 5 you're driving maybe 2 or 3 miles, and you are so it was pretty lucky for me at that point, because I was much younger then. I was always able to somehow compensate for the lack of sleep. It's probably because of why I'm sleeping so much these days.
So what was the setup like at the actual jacuzzi place? The production building, we'll call it.
Well, nothing. When I came in, it looked nothing like a jacuzzi building place. It looked like a stage at that point.
Yeah.
Everything had been taken out, and they built up all the stages for the different departments and the sets. The stages for the sets, and
it must have been pretty cool.
There was another building next door they took over that was another part of the production, and so they had like two entities of the production going on next door to each other. So it was really very efficient. And our makeup area wasn't like, a great makeup area. It was like they put us in a conference room, for all these extra makeups. But all the main makeups were done in one of the trailers they had. They had two makeup trailers set up, one for Shinzia Zanetti and her makeup team, and then Jerry Gergely and his makeup effects team. And they would do all the work in those separate trailers.
These are all foam appliances.
They were all foam latex, yeah. We were I don't make them out of foam if I can. It's like, but it was pretty regular. The only one weird thing about it was next door to a paper recycling plant, and in the parking lot, all these like bits of paper would come floating in like snowflakes.
That could have been useful if you were doing an exterior alien planet scene and you built a little set.
Yeah, exactly.
Did it feel like a family atmosphere working on B5? Was there that camaraderie sense? I
can say that it was one of the most well-oiled machines I walked into. Right. They had everything together, and they had already gone through numerous supervisors like me, and I was just the last guy in line. And then a guy named Mark Garbarino came in, and we did the TV movies together.
Right. They must have been pretty happy with your work, because you did seasons 4 and 5, and then you did, I think, nearly all the TV movies, pretty much, most of them.
Pretty much, yeah. I went to we were doing Buffy at the same time. We were doing Babylon 5, and I'll never forget, for the first 2 episodes of the second season of Buffy, I was running the show on both Babylon and Buffy, and it was just too much of a workload. So Mark Garbarino got brought in to handle Buffy, but yeah, and then eventually, after that stuff ended, where did I go after that? I think I reopened my shop, and I probably reopened my garage or something, and it's like it's such a muddle at some point. It's like going to Romania all the time for full moon, and
so you went back to work on stuff for full moon after your initial period of working with Empire as well.
Yeah, because I first went for full moon on the Primevals, and then after I worked at Optic Nerve, Chris Bergschneider and we got a show called The Killer Eye. Mark Williams, who was doing it, passed away and left a void, and so Chris was sort of around full moon at that time, and then he pulled me in, and we did that. We did a 4-day wonder, which is a lot of fun, actually. Dave Dakota was really great on that show, and he hired us on. I mean, before the end of the fourth day, we found out we were doing Retro Puppet Master and Witch House, and then we ended up doing all those shows. And it's just it kind of all blurs at some point. All the shows kind of like
I can imagine
one to the other, and sometimes I need to go back and reread stuff.
Have you got to? Did you get to keep any cool props or costume items apart from the little guy that you showed us earlier?
Yeah, sometimes I do. I mean, I've got a couple of things around here. My space is pretty limited, so I don't really keep much stuff. I've got a head from Bill Malone's Parasomnia. Oh boy, I got a dummy head for Ancient Evil's Scream of the Mummy that never got made, and I believe that got released in the UK as Bram Stoker's Legend of the Mummy 2.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And just like a few things, not that much. And then when I have my shop open, of course, you've always got eye candy around, stuff for people to look at. But
I want to mention two films very quickly before we wrap up. And if anyone's got any final questions for Jeff, please chuck them in the chat now. I'd be greatly remiss if I didn't mention what I think is one of the most underrated horror films of the 1980s, and that's Frank Darabont's 1988 remake of The Blob.
yes.
Not only do I think it's a really good film that pays great homage to the original, tonally it's pitch perfect. I just love the way they set up loads of characters as heroes who they then promptly dispatch in various grisly fashions. Now, and here's a picture of one of those dispatchments, if that's a word. It is now. Is this the sort of stuff you would have been responsible for? Were you on the whole film?
I came in. They had been working on it for about 4 months, from what I understand.
Oh,
and I was in Italy at the time on Arena when they had started pre-production on The Blob. They had shot the live act. They went to Louisiana and shot all the location stuff.
Right.
Then for all the effects and post-production, they came to LA to shoot all the stage stuff and miniatures up at Dream Quest. I had just got back from Arena and I was looking for a job. And a couple of weeks later, I went over an interview with Lyle Conway, and the next day it was on the show. And I did it only about a month and a half on the show. It was like I did a lot of stuff that still ended up in the film. Like I worked on stuff like the sink that the guy gets his head sucked into.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's a gruesome scene.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And they built a rig. The animatronics guy built a rig that was sort of like an egg beater type of thing, and you'd pull a cable and it would collapse on itself for the guy's head to go down the drain. It was brilliant. It was such a great looking thing. But around for a lot of stuff. Tony Gardner's stuff handled a lot of the Blob victim stuff, and we just did the Blob itself.
Right.
Yeah, that was Lyle Conway's gig, and I was on his crew, which meant things like mixing 35-gallon drums of Methacel, and I did some sculpting on it a little bit of, kind of a lot of everything. And going up to set, there was about a few weeks. One of the things that made me consider leaving the show, and in 1978, I was corresponding with Jack Harris, and I told him at that point one of my goals was to work on a film that he produced. And 10 years later, I fulfilled that goal. But I wasn't really that enamored working on it. Getting yelled at all the time. Chuck Russell just had. He's a great guy, but it was a really stressful show.
Right.
But
it's kind of up there. It's for me. This is one of the great remakes of the 80s. There's kind of a trilogy. It's obviously it's The Thing, The Fly, and The Blob. That's an incredible kind of.
But that's just despite everything behind the scenes, everything works so great in the film. I think it was that stress that helped it. It gave everybody sort of attention that this movie should have. I mean, listen, I watched
Yeah.
Chuck yell at Mark Irwin, and I watched him yell at Shawnee Smith. And then the day I got yelled at, I went, I'm part of the crew. You know? It's like,
Yeah.
but, you know, I mean, we did a lot of stuff, and we'd have to go to Dream Quest and then shoot miniature stuff at the end of the day. So it was like about 3 weeks. I was going from Hollywood, I drive from Glendale to Hollywood, work a few hours, go from Hollywood to Valencia for the first unit shoot, work a few hours. Then I drive from Valencia to Simi Valley and work on the miniatures unit. And I was doing that like every day for like 3 weeks.
The miniature work in that is amazing.
It is, yeah, really good.
There's some really great stuff. We would be underneath that set. There'd be a bunch of us, and we would take plastic bags to ourselves.
Yeah.
And we'd cover ourselves in plastic bags and tape, and we would still find methicel had crept in. No matter what we did, there's always methicel creeping in.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's one of those things. But I'm so proud to have worked on a film like that because, again, you're right. The Thing and The Fly and The Blob are really the three in the 80s that make up sort of this weird unconnected trilogy of 1950 Earth remakes. And you know, and it's great because at that time you really could see the wheels were turning with people, and they were being very inventive, and they didn't rely. Technology was to be relied on to help sell the story instead of being the story itself, and that's sort of what I'm a little, seeing these days. It gets a little worrying, and that's something that special effects movies have always been branded with, is the movies only exist because of the special effects. But these days it seems a little more,
So, I mean, you also worked on Demolition Man.
Yes.
Was that, what particular thing did you do on that, and at what point did you come onto the movie?
I was brought in as part of the original crew. There was a very small group of guys brought in. It was Yuri Everson and Gino Acevedo who were at the shop. They were like sort of the main guys at the shop, and then Andy Schoenberg and myself, and I think Alan Barlow maybe, and then there was a guy named Tony McRae who had come out of the aerospace industry, and he is the one who brought in all of the syntactic dough and epoxy technology that we use for a lot of molds these days. And he had been doing that over in the aerospace industry, and he started working with us at Precision Effects, teaching us that stuff. And then on Demolition Man, all the molds were made out of this advanced, like epoxies and doughs and stuff like that to keep the molds lightweight and large and stuff. But we made all these bodies. I mean, we made a prototype body, and then there's the Stallone body, and there's I think the Snipes body might have been a retooling of the original body with the new head. But we made, I don't know how many of these things we made. And they're all put in hockey pucks and all made out of Skinflex 3. This is before silicone was really advanced enough. We used silicone in Death Becomes Her, but it just wasn't advanced enough to be reliable to use on a show like this. So we made all these bodies and got them. They were all taken to set, and eventually, like every job, it ends. I found myself unemployed and sitting around the house, and one day I get a call from Tom or Alec saying, Yuri is on set over at Warner Brothers, but he's going to be leaving in a few weeks to go get married, and they're like woefully behind schedule on the show, and they're still shooting, and we need someone to go over and keep an eye on stuff. They said the pay is this much, and would you go do it? And I said, yeah, sure, of course. And so for maybe close to a month or so, I was there at Stage 16, where they shot the T-Rex scenes for Jurassic Park, and it's the largest, I think, the largest stage in LA, and it was where we shot all the final scenes for Demolition Man in the cryo chamber. And I was around for Stallone getting into his for his bit, and he dropped his he dropped his robe, and there he was in the buff in front of every one of us. And never got to meet Sandra Bullock. She wasn't on at that time. But both Stallone and Wesley Snipes were there on set. We had to do some really fun stuff, but most of my job for a lot of the time, except for when Wesley Snipes got killed and stuff. And by that time, Tom and Alec, who were already doing something else, they came back, and I think Yuri came back afterwards, and we all kind of finished up together on it. I was sort of, again, low man on the totem pole, which was fine, but I mean, God, it was really great. Marco Brambilla, the director, was awesome. I liked him a lot. And I got to deal with Joel Silver a little bit, which was interesting. The man in the silk pajamas.
Please tell us more. Please tell us more about Joel Silver.
He, he wanted me to throw a severed head, the severed head of Wesley Snipes, and I kept like tossing it. I kept rolling it in the scene. It would like bounce on the nose and then go off, or it's incredibly. You're not rolling a bowling ball, a bowling ball with a nose. But finally I said, I had to hell with it, just because Joel kind of got perturbed at me. He said, I had to hell with it. Here, get somebody to come in and just do this. And but God, it was amazing. I mean, it was the biggest budget film I'd been on and been on set for, and they had like A-list craft service set up, and the Taco Bell had their full table, and they trucked in food 2 or 3 times a day.
Wow,
nice.
It's a Stallone production. It's a different level of catering.
It really was, yeah. I mean, it was great because working with I can't remember which Kevin Westmore maybe I think was on that, and Scott Edo was Stallone's makeup artist, but he was really cool because he'd just done all kinds of great stuff. And
did you get to meet British actor Michael Hawthorne, who I completely forgot was in this movie?
Yeah, but it was great because we're in the middle of Warner Brothers. That's sort of like that's when you realize you're in Hollywood. Working on the Universal backlot on a couple of things. That's when I'd done all this stuff, but I'd never worked on the Universal backlot. And I finally did a couple of shows there. And one of the shows, we were part of the tour. The tram had to stop, and while we were filming, and that's stuff I experienced as a kid. And and then you find yourself experiencing. You find yourself standing at the craft service table craft service truck getting coffee, while you got people taking pictures. Yeah.
So going on to Tom and Alex, this is where we actually have something in common. Alien 3.
Go on. Alien 3.
No kidding.
Yeah. So you were on your side of the pond, were you not?
Yeah.
Pretty much at the end of the shoot. So just tell us a little bit about what you were actually doing on Alien 3 at this particular point.
This is why we call him the inside man, you see. Don't lie, because we'll know.
You told me what you were doing, because I'm fascinated. I love hearing stuff like this. But I was over on Death Becomes Her was going, and Alien 3 pickups, all the reshoots, the additional stuff was gearing, and so they had to rebuild the Bishop animatronic, and I worked a bit on the Rottweiler. That was probably the main extent of it, because I was really mostly committed to Death Becomes Her at that time. So it was really kind of not an alien related job on that film. It was more like the one of the extra props.
But it was that was I think because of its obviously its production problems and everything over in the UK. Let's say production problems. Let's just say Fox problems. More than anything. Yeah, and the three producers, Wolf Hill, David Giler, and Gordon Carroll, particularly David Giler, unfortunately. I think he was the main kind of pot stirrer in that bad situation, making a bad situation even worse. But having said that, I still think visually it turned out to be an incredible looking movie. Um, you know, even the reshoots. I mean, I know a lot of people do like the assembly cut now, what they consider to be the definitive cut with the Bambi burster. But I do like the dog burster sequence. I really do like
Oh,
it. I think it does fit.
oh,
You have the foreshadowing of that anyway. So yeah, I really like it. I love that. And I do like the rod puppet stuff. There's some
oh yeah.
slightly slight problems with scaling, I think. Some slight scaling problems there.
It
Um,
moves.
but
It's kind of
overall, I think
pretty.
visually it's an incredible piece of work.
Yeah, it's a it's. I remember finding the design for the bull alien um,
Yeah,
up in rafters one day and studying
yeah.
that. And it's funny because it wasn't until a little bit later, though, I did get to work more directly with the alien suit on a Pepsi commercial that was.
Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I was talking. I think I was telling Lance about that actually a while back.
Oh
yeah,
yeah, I remember you talking about it.
yeah, we did that for. We had to rebuild one of the suits for it, so I ended up resculpting all the fiberglass stuff that had been broken and stuff. I ended up resculpting all
Great.
that,
Yeah.
and uh, uh, it was really cool. It was like and somebody sent me a copy of that a while back, and I looked at it and I completely forgot about this thing. You know.
You
I've
mentioned
actually
death. Sorry.
sorry.
I was just going to say we've mentioned Death Becomes Her a few times. But we haven't really spoken about it as such. And somebody did ask an interesting question earlier, which was David Macy, because it was one of the first films first big movies that I can remember them using CGI combined with makeup. And I just
Yeah.
wondered
Mm.
to what extent that may have impeded Jeff with any creative decisions you or the makeup team made or had to make. Was that done in consultation with you and the
Well,
post-production guys? Were you working with post-production for the first time in a combo of bringing things together, or how did that all come about?
I hate to be like the disappointing Donnie.
No,
Actually, a lot
please.
was in the lab on that one. I mean, I was strictly a lab guy on that show.
Mm.
So you
But
you were making bits for the set. Was that?
yeah, well, the first thing I remember doing was I did some sculpting on the dummy of Goldie Hawn, and then they moved me over to Tom and Alec moved me over to running the Meryl Streep body. It was like a half body from waist up with her neck twisted. That was used for some of the stuff, not all of it. And I'll be honest with you, I thought the digital stuff worked well because it was so odd that you really, it was visually arresting in a lot of ways. I think you can forgive a little
Yeah.
bit of, because again, it was early stuff. But it was really interesting and very funny too. They played it so well that it really it all worked. But this dummy was like silicone. We're burning everything in silicone, and I ran that for 30 days straight. For an entire month, I ran copy after copy after copy because it had to be a perfect skin for one thing, and it would be we'd run one and find out, oh, there's a bubble here, so we have to drill a bleeder here.
Yeah.
We have a bubble here, we have to drill a bleeder here, and so on and so on until we would be able to get all of those things out so that we'd be able to cast up a pretty flawless piece. And I remember on day 29, I opened up the mold, and it was a really decent piece. And then Tom and Alec went, you know something? do one more, and that was the hero. But with the budget the way it was, and his deep pocket show, it was on almost any other show I would have been fired a long time before that. But they kept me going on it. They said, nope, just make it better, make it better, make it better. And that was really cool. I look back on that now and think, wow, what an amazing experience that was to have.
But they're great guys to work with, aren't they? They're great guys to work with, Tom and Alex.
They're really good. I mean, it's like, it's, because they have their attitude melds well with the guys in the shop, because they were shop guys also. So they have really good rapport with everybody, and not only that, they're outstanding artists themselves. So really, that, they would say something to me like, something, listen to us. And I heard it from a few other people. Don't do it your way, do it our way. So if it screws up, we take the blame. But really, it was wild. I think I was there for on and off for about 3 years, and then and it was kind of shifting too. The shop was getting a bit bigger, and they were taking on bigger jobs, and you kind of felt smaller and smaller at that point. And you want to grow a bit, you gotta spread your wings, and that's what I did. And it's funny. I got the fame part down. The fortune part's the part that's kind of like eluding me, but
yeah,
mate, I know the feeling.
Converted here, man. On
I thought there was
that
supposed to come together, but despite that, I mean, it's really cool because I get to speak with guys like you, and you guys get to be incredibly, bored with my, jabbering on,
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, I'm conscious of the fact that we've kept you on far longer than is sensible, and we're coming up. We've just come over the 2-hour mark.
Yeah. Like
so I really no. I mean, I could listen, Jeff. I could quite happily have you back, because there's a whole load of other topics I haven't even touched on yet, and I'm jumping around to try and cram in as much as we can.
It'll make it a cliffhanger, and then we'll come back later and we'll find out if it all worked out for me.
we can do that.
Actually,
Melvin, please.
I do actually have a couple of
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let me ask this one first, Inside Man. This may not be relevant. Charles Lippicott's role in the making of Alien 3, while all the insanity was going on, he was the only one making any sense in interviews. Does that ring true?
I wish I could answer that question. That's a really good question, because I remember Charlie Lippincott all the way back from Star Wars and stuff like that. And again, because I was thrown into I got a phone calls. Hey, can you come over and work? And I went into work, and there's what we were doing, and it was, like I said, it was an 8-hour a day. Well, I think 9-hour a day job.
We've got a comment from Mr. Tickle Trunk here saying, please bring him back soon. So there's already a request for you to come back from one of the Mr. Men. So we can't refuse them.
Mr. Tickle Trunk,
Inside Man, you had a couple of questions for Jeff before we wrap up.
Yeah, I suppose the first one would be, I mean, is there a makeup that you have seen done by another artist that you think, boy, I wish I'd done that?
It's like almost every makeup I see. Honestly,
that's a long list then.
I don't think I'm the best makeup artist in the world. Believe me, I look at some of my stuff and go, oh, that's good. And I've done a couple of things I really go, oh man, did I get off on the wrong mark? And that happens to almost everybody at some point. But yeah, it's like I see so much stuff, especially these days. Like the realism is just outstanding. And I come from the days when Dick Smith said, we can't do it that realistic. We have to have, you have to kind of do some tricks here and there, and you have to simulate the realism. It's now these days, it's just like people are just, sometimes you can pick up on it, but really, I mean,
but don't you think that's a lot of that's to do with
this is one of yours.
Yeah, I'll say one thing about this. This is from the film Abruptio, and this is Sid Haig's final character. Sid Haig from House of a Thousand Corpses and this was his final character. He passed away after he did his voice work on the shows. Abruptio.
I mean, because you also did makeup on this particular famous horror icon, Michael Berryman, who I've heard Michael. I've heard he's really nice in person. Is that true?
He just really was like, I had seen him in Hills Have Eyes when I was a kid, and I thought, where do they find him? This must be real. It was sort of like I thought, because he's so good in the role and because of his unique look, you could just buy it. Like, you put him in some bones and leather. He's like, But when I met him, when we found out we were going to do his makeup, this was for a show called Love and Curses that Mick Garris had come up with, and he shot it in the UK originally as She-Wolf of London. And they came back to LA and retooled the show as Love and Curses, and had the actors back and stuff. But when we were doing this episode, which is sort of a takeoff on Universal horror films, they end up in sort of a Universal horror film. So we did a Wolfman makeup and and stuff like that. But this Frankenstein makeup, originally we were thinking, God, we hope we get somebody like Vincent Schiavelli or something with a really great face to play the character. And then we found it was going to be Michael Berryman, and I ended up sculpting the pieces because somebody else was on it, wasn't really getting it, so I got tasked with sculpting these pieces, and they were all generic. They weren't even cast on Michael; they were just generic pieces that I made, and so I did that makeup on him, and I just had the greatest time. He's so wonderful. I mean, what an amazing man, and what amazing stories, and I just really, I'm so grateful that I got to work with him, because like I said, I was kind of afraid of him at the beginning, and then I found out just what an amazing, charming, wonderful guy he is.
You also got to do this iconic piece as well from the Red Dwarf American remake, I think.
The U.S. Red Dwarf. The failed pilots.
The failed, one of there's lots of those. That's a big list.
Yeah, we but that was funny too, because I got a phone call on a Sunday morning, and I was living in this house over in Van Nuys, and I had my shop there and stuff. But like half of the block was industrial. Like the first half of the block was houses, and then it segued into like industrial buildings. And about 2 blocks up the street was my friend's prop place. And I got a phone call on a Sunday morning. Hey, can you come up here? And I just walked up there like the 2 blocks, and there's Robert Llewellyn standing there, and they said, hey, we're doing the Babylon. I mean, the Babylon. Sorry, the Red Dwarf pilot
reboot
for
US
US, and would you like to do the Crichton makeup or the Crichton prosthetics? And I said, yeah, because Andrea Pennell, I believe her name is. She came over as part of the group from the UK to work on the US pilots.
Right.
And so I was going to handle the actual makeup on him, but I got hired to make the prosthetic for it. And what was so wild was Robert had brought a copy of his head cast with him from the UK. And all I did is I took it, I walked the 2 blocks down the street to my house, and I got it, set up, and I made a new copy of it. I made a mold of that and made a new copy of it, and sculpted a new piece and molded it, and got a few foam runs out for them. And again, despite the fact that it was pretty terribly, everybody really didn't have a good opinion of it. I'm really happy to worked on that and had the opportunity to work with Robert, even for one day when I got to meet him. It was just wonderful.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy. Tell us about this little chat quickly.
Good old Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys. Somehow the show that everybody had that ended up in my lap. And that was Charlie Band had hired Chris Berkshire and I during a show with William Shatner that we were doing for Sci-Fi Channel. And Charlie hands us the script in 2002 and says, "You guys are doing it."
Yeah.
And then it disappeared. Everything just kind of went back out into the ether. And it was around 2004 when we got a phone call from Charlie, Chris and I, saying that he had sold the property to Sci-Fi Channel, and then a new executive producer was taking over, a guy named Jeff Franklin, and we were still on the show. We were being retained along with Ted Nicolau and Courtney Joyner. So, and we went in, we finally haggled out a budget, got about $20,000 or $30,000 less than we had hoped for. Found out our 7-week schedule was 5 weeks suddenly because we had 2 weeks of shipping we had to deal with. And we got through. I mean, we struggled through it. We made do, and we were still building stuff when we got to Bulgaria for the show. And it is what it is. It's really kind of crude in some ways. And we spent, I think, a little more time developing these animatronic puppets than we really needed to. But we wanted the baby Oopsie to be different. And I redesigned that one to be a little more thuggish than the original film, because I worked on the original Demonic Toys. But
Right.
the baby Oopsie to be a little different. I didn't want to copy what John Beekler had done because I didn't feel that was respectful to my friend. And the show aired. As a matter of fact, we were the third picture in a 3-picture deal. So we were the final picture being shot over in Bulgaria, which was the Bruce Campbell films, Alien Apocalypse and Man with the Screaming Brain. And then we were the third picture in this 3-picture deal. And we were the first picture to be released. They had such an ironclad release date. We began pre-production at the end of June in 2004. We were in Bulgaria shooting in August and into September. And that film was finished 100% and on the desk at Sci-Fi Channel at the beginning of November.
Wow.
So it was like 5 months, less than 6
Oh
months.
my God.
Entire film. And a lot of people,
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Like it. I got one review, an IMDb, some fan review says the guy who made the puppet should be beaten with a sack of doorknobs. Somebody also said that. Somebody said I made $2 million on the film, and I was like, "Wow, I wish I had."
Not sure that the film had that budget, did it?
No, it's like I think it was shot for more like 800,000 or
Yeah.
I think it was 750 or 800,000. That film.
That's a Charlie Band normal budget, I think.
That was sort of, but Charlie would have shaved off about 250 grand.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to say.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we got it done and it got out for Christmas, and now it's a perennial favorite, for everybody at the holiday period. So
that's an amazing turnaround time. An incredible turnaround time.
Yeah, surprising that it even got, and heck, originally we were going to have Fred Willard play Toulon in that film.
Oh man, I loved him.
Amazing. And then I was in Jeff Franklin's office the day he made the deal to hire Corey Feldman. And it was so funny because I had just done a film recently before with Corey Haim, and I thought, well, I know my punishment eventually is going to be to work with Corey Feldman. And honestly, something? I like Corey. I like them both, actually, but Corey Feldman actually turned out to be a really nice guy. He never had any ego or attitude during the show.
Good.
He was really cool. As a matter of fact, he felt the first time he dealt with the puppets, he felt he was being a little rough with them. He walked up to me and said, "Listen, I think I might have done something to this, and I hope I didn't ruin it." And I looked at that and I said, "No, this is fine. But thank you for asking." And yeah, so like I said, I never really had any problem with Corey at all because he was really, yeah, he was. I think he's just interested in just doing it and getting it done and moving on to the thing. But still, he was very personable and didn't give any of the ego that you really kind of hear about.
So you're still working now.
Sorry.
We've got My Babysitter, the Superhero, Halitosis, The Legend of Stankmouth. That's got to be the best title of a film ever. And the Primevals on sort of recent CV things. I'm looking forward to seeing the Primevals. Is there anything not mentioned on IMDb that you've worked on that we should look out for in the near future?
That is a pretty complete list. I have one thing coming up called Campfire, which again, it's so early that they're still searching out money for it and doing script rights and stuff like that. So that could take a little while because it's got a pretty large cast. I've got a short film with a guy named Mike Williamson, who I did another short film with called Deathly a few years ago with that starred Alan Ruck from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah. I think he's a very, very underrated actor.
Oh, he's amazing. Him and Kathleen Wilhoit were both in it. She was in films like Dream Demon and
that was one I worked on. Dream
yes.
Demon.
Yeah, she's awesome. I love her. She's so cool and it was, I made her look like a charred potato chip. I mean, it was like she was like, covered head to toe in a rubber suit with like latex and corn chips all over it to simulate burnt skin. It was so low budget. I'm getting ready to do another one with Mike. And that'll come up, I think, around December. And lately, I mean, I'm in the middle of. Matter of fact, I got to run foam, get 2 more foam runs in today. Every year I do a lady named Debbie Allen. She's a dancer and director. She was in the movie Fame.
Yeah. I absolutely know who she is. Yeah,
her dance academy every year does a Halloween. I mean, does a Christmas show. And so I make prosthetics for them every year, and so I'm in the middle of that right now. And one of the cast from the original Fame movie passed away today. Oh no, really?
Oh, who is that?
And by the way, this is Rennie, who's
I'm sorry.
This is Rennie, who's one of the members of the Outcast Creative, one of my moderators and a good friend, and she wanted to come in and say hi.
Nice to meet you, Jeff. Very honored to be asked on.
I am more than honored to be here myself. It's an honor to meet all.
But it was one of the older actresses. She was the casting director on Big Trouble in Little China, as well as being an older character actress, really well known, super respected in the industry. I'm just getting her name, but yeah. She was in some scenes with Debbie Allen because I've seen a still of them together in the movie, and I've got a lot of time for Debbie Allen. I really like her, so if you're going to see her, tell her she's got a fan over in the UK. With the name of the lady was Joanna Merlin. Joanna Merlin.
Oh boy, I have to look her up. I mean,
I tell you who you would know her because you must have seen John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
You remember the bag lady who looks up to the moon and you get the close up of the ants crawling over her face? That's Joanna Merlin.
Oh, okay, all right. So yeah, of course, now I have a face. I can put it to.
Yeah, as soon as I give you a recognizable horror context, you're there.
Well, we lost over the past week or so. We lost both Anthony Hickox and Jeff Burr both. And I knew, I worked with Anthony on Lobster Man from Mars. I was in the Lobster Man suit at the end of the film with all the where they're out in the he gets boiled by Old Faithful and the geyser but I had talks and skeleton, and he was like, "Oh, you Lobster Man," and I point the gun at him, and he's, but and I saw in Bulgaria of all places when I was doing Puppet Master versus Monty Toys. Scott Coulter took me over to New Boyana Studios, and and Anthony was over there doing a show called Submerged, and so we talked a little bit, and then Jeff Burr, I mean, was an old friend from the Full Moon days, and
was that the Steven Seagal film Submerged?
that was the Steven Seagal film. It started out apparently as an alien film, and then Seagal went, "Oh, I want aliens." I don't want that.
I had two friends that were in that movie, and they both said they said the shoot was an absolute nightmare.
I heard they just didn't know what they were doing at that point because the script is so rewritten at that point. They had no focus, and
yeah, he never stuck to any of his lines. So people would go to do scenes, and he would just say anything, and that even sometimes that was even with the boards in front of him with the lines written on. I mean,
no, I can't believe that a Steve Seagal movie was a nightmare. I don't believe that. Steven Seagal movie a nightmare? No way.
Right?
We're on his hit list now. That's
yeah, I worked on one Seagal. Got to meet him, so I'm grateful for that. A friend of mine though was his first AD for years, and I'm surprised he did more than one show with him.
So you did do a film with him?
Yeah, it was called On Deadly Ground, but I was working for a stuntman who I was making like stunt masks. He specialized in full body burns, and so I did a mask for him for Die Hard 2, and then he used that. Well, he called me up and said I need another mask, and he used it in everything from that to Lethal Weapon 3 to, you know, so everyone's like, hey, there's my mask. It's, you know, there's my another $150 I got.
So just to be clear, Jeff, this person in this still is you. Is this right?
That is me. Yeah, holding the that was me, and that is me in the suit. Yeah, that's me in the Lobsterman suit. There was the guy before though. There was a guy named SD Nemeth in the other suit for that, and he was the guy in RoboCop who goes, "I'll buy that for $1."
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh, yeah. Right. Okay.
But apparently, again, they needed somebody about his size and build for the reshoots, and you know, it wasn't reshoots, I think, but I think it was just extra stuff they needed to shoot. And Brian Pennicus, who was handling the makeup, called me up and said, "Hey, it's $100 for the day. You'll come and do it." It's like, sure, why not?
You said just now, and this is the longest wrap up ever, but sorry. You said just now that you met Corey Feldman, you had some reservations because, of course, you know there's a lot of history there with everything we've heard. But actually, he was great. He was professional. He was thoughtful, which is lovely. It's lovely to hear that. Has there been somebody else like that you've worked with who maybe you had a preconception about, who really surprised you and turned out to be fantastically lovely?
William Shatner for sure. I mean, Malcolm McDowell also. Because
that's awesome.
I've just been watching Malcolm McDowell in Our Friends in the North.
Yeah,
one of his best performances of his career, I would say. Yeah,
it's so funny. I mean, William Shatner, the deal with Charlie Band calling us up and saying, "Hey, we're doing this Sci-Fi Channel show with him," and for the 4 days we shot with Bill, he was amazing. And second day in, he got everybody in the crew together and said, "Anything you want signed, bring in tomorrow." And
really nice
stuff. And he signed every single thing. I've got about 2 hours of footage of him, behind the scenes footage of him just like cutting up the crew and just making everybody laugh. And it's just a wonderful, really wonderful guy. And Malcolm McDowell too was on John Buechler's final film, Wizard Dream. And he had hired Malcolm, and I had done a couple of things that Malcolm was in, but I never got to meet him. And you just always kind of like, you're just never sure if they're going to be approachable or something. And it always turns out the people that play kind of the less than good characters are always the nicest people, anyways. And my fiance Maggie she'd moved to LA from North Carolina as Wizard Dream was getting going, and it was like her first job in LA. But the first day she was here, first full day, we had to go down to the set to pack up the makeup trailer, and it happened to be the day that Malcolm came in to sign his contracts, and so we were the only ones there with him. And they had he just turned to be the most wonderful guy, and he meets Maggie, and then he meets me, and then they have this gigantic sushi bread, and he comes, come join me. Come join me for lunch. And
what year was this?
This was in 2013, I believe. It was 2013 because we were working on it, and that was when Ray Harryhausen passed away.
Right.
So, yeah, so it was 2013, but it is
He's a great actor, though.
It's a film that may never see the light of day. It's
what was the title of it again?
It was called Wizard Dream, and it was John Buechler's final film. It was sort of a film set in the universe of Troll.
Right.
And so,
okay.
Yeah, and we had, Ernie Hudson was in it, and Bonnie Aarons. Bonnie was a friend of mine, and I got her cast in one of the roles before she became the nun. But we got through production. We shot final day of wrap, and then the film fell apart because they ran afoul of IATSE, the union here, and who practically shut them down because they were trying to shoot it non-union.
Right.
We all, got. Well, we never got any bump for it, but we all got our days out of it and stuff, and then the show has sort of faded into obscurity now, and
that's a shame.
It's never be seen.
Yeah, what a shame. Well, you never know. As a result of discussing it on this show, when it goes viral, somebody might go and say, "Oh, let's dig that up and make sure we give Jeff a producer's credit." So,
what was Malcolm McDowell's character in the movie, Jeff? Sorry.
Go on.
Oh, can you repeat that, please?
What character? What character? What was Malcolm McDowell's character in the movie?
He played a man who is I believe he's in a coma, but he is also in this other world. It's sort of, he becomes like a portal, I think, for some characters to go through into this other like wizard world. This sort of, again, sort of a troll. It was sort of troll-like in some ways. And he, John Buechler's Troll, of course. But he also played the wizard. Oh boy, and I can't remember his name. He had a wizardy sort of name. Let's put it that way. And a very, of course, he has a close cropped hair. But our wig guy tied this really nice wig for him. It was really cool. The same with long hair and. But my gosh, really, what a wonderful experience that was working with him.
Yeah, I just looked for that film because it would have been John Buechler would have been the director, right, of this wizard.
Yeah, it was. He like I said, it was his final film. As a matter of fact, if you look that up on IMDb, it has been scrubbed completely.
Yeah, it's not there. That's I've been.
Yeah,
I can't even find anything about it on Google either.
Amazing, yeah. It's like I don't know what's happened. It's like I think this is one of the tragedies that should be righted.
Well, I think we should just give John a bit of a shout out on the channel now, who passed away in 2019, and he directed Troll and Rage War: The Challenges of Excalibrate, which was another 80s video store favorite. And I think actually he may have got a mention on the Tim Thomason interview we did, but I think he was quite well liked. Is that fair?
Really one of the most amazing people I've ever met, and he treated me like a son. He was sort of like an extra father for me, and I miss him dearly. Losing him was really tough. A bunch of us went up to see him as he was in the hospital, and it was just, everybody was in tears at that point. But John, true to form, kept us all laughing also. He always would have something to say that just would make you laugh, and so even up to the end, he was still, cutting up and giving us a reason to smile. Well,
I think that's a good place to wrap it up for tonight, especially in memory of someone who was a mentor to you. Jeff, we've got to have you back on. Got to come back on and do this again, and I'll try and get a younger makeup. I'll try and get a younger makeup artist on, not some old fucker like the Inside Man, but someone young who's just starting out who can ask you some,
you got the guy here. I'll tell you that much. It's like
I think this person Sam who's just said hi. I think this is Sam, one of my makeup artists who works in the UK, and she's
nice.
She's quite big now. Oh, God, I'm trying to remember her surname. I just always call her Sam. And actually, I've been trying to get her on the channel for quite a while, and she was going to come on for a shoot, for an interview, and had to drop out because she then had a shoot and a really early call time and didn't know when she was.
Reason to drop out of something is
it's a paycheck is always a good reason. That may or may not be the right Sam, but if it is, not fat Sam. No, I know that. But
oh my gosh, Lance.
no, that's them. They just said that. Sorry, I'm not fat.
You did say this Sam's got bigger.
Sam is not fat. She's very tall and slim. Anyway. Before I go full partridge, I think we need to get out of here. Sorry, Jeff.
Said she got really big.
In her career.
No problems. But
Jeff, any final thought? If you now in your career could go back to your 20-year-old self and give themselves one piece of advice, apart from get paid from Charlie Band up front. What piece of advice would you go back and give yourself?
Oh boy, probably save your shekels, eat right, probably get more sleep. The rest I don't regret. So,
fab. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Well, it just remains for me to say thank you to Jeff for giving up his time and talking to us about a whole range of topics in the world of makeup and practical special effects. I do hope you will come back, because I'm sure there's lots of Babylon 5 stories we can unearth. So many things I wanted to ask you about that, but we wanted to do a broad overview of your very extensive career. Thanks to the Inside Man, who's very knowledgeable in this particular area. So it's great having you on as a co-host, sir. And also for Rennie popping in late as our obligatory fangirl that I promised. I promised Jeff a gorgeous fangirl would turn up. And Rennie, thank you very much for stepping in.
Thanks for asking. I just got home when I popped in from work. So, and my husband is a huge sci-fi fan, so he is just a little bit jealous over here, but it's all good.
He's probably seen quite a few of the movies.
He sure has.
Yeah. Time to get Robojocks out and pop it on the Blu-ray player. Right, guys. I am going to be back online next, I think on Thursday for my gaming stream, and then on Saturday I have got a big deep dive into one of the best British television shows of all time, which does, of course, star, among others, Malcolm McDowell, as well as Daniel Craig, Mark Strong, Christopher Eccleston, Alan Armstrong, Danny Webb, who's been interviewed on the channel, Stephen Marcus, who's been interviewed on the channel, and a whole host of other people. And that's our friends in the North. We're going to be doing a two-parter on it because it's 9 episodes, and I've just rewatched it for the 20th time, and I'm already on episode 8. So we're going to really go into that show. It's had a huge influence on me as a writer and as a creator. It inspired me to write Sticks and Stones, which was my second play, which I've always called Our Friends in Northern Ireland. I dedicated that play to Peter Flannery when I published it on Amazon. It's on there now if anybody wants to check it out. Jester Mikey's been with us the whole time. So he's saying later, everybody. So that's for you, Jeff. I think you know each other. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do. It's growing nicely. I'm nearly at 2,500 subscribers. I've got more news on guests. I've got not one, but 3 directors now committed to doing interviews this side of Christmas. We're just trying to work out dates. The latest one is Stuart Urban, who directed the first 2 episodes of Our Friends in the North. He did An Ungentlemanly Act with Bob Peck, of course, who would go on to star in Jurassic Park. That's an award-winning production, and he recently directed a 4-part drama with James Nesbitt about a serial killer in Ireland, true story. So he's had a particularly fascinating career. He's going to be a fantastic guest. I'm going to be sure to see if he needs any makeup artists, Jeff, when we get him on. So yeah, so Stuart Urban, I think, is going to be coming on pretty soon. I think we're going to be having him within the next couple of weeks. So he's likely to be the next industry interview. I've got 2 other directors as well. I don't want to say who they are yet until I know for dates for certain, but Stuart's committed to coming on very soon. So felt safe to announce him. In the meantime, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks for your questions and your comments. Don't forget to leave a comment below and share the love for the channel. And we'll see you all again real soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
And go